Elena worked with desperate precision, her hands steady despite the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. For the past 6 hours, she had been performing the most complex genetic reconstruction of her career, using a combination of human medical technology and improvised techniques that no textbook had ever described. The infant draconic lay still on the medical table, its breathing shallow but steady thanks to the life support systems Elena had rigged around it. Countless tubes and wires connected the tiny creature to machines that monitored every aspect of its biology while delivering precisely calculated doses of genetic repair. Agent's cellular reconstruction at 47%, Elena announced to her observers, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. The artificial modifications are breaking down, but I'm seeing some resistance in the neural pathways. Through the observation window, she could see that the crowd had grown significantly. Word had spread throughout Nexus Station about the human doctor who was attempting the impossible. Scientists from a dozen species pressed against the glass, watching with fascination as Elena worked to save a creature that their own governments would have considered too dangerous to approach. Commander Thrix had given up trying to stop her hours ago. Now he simply monitored the situation, ready to evacuate the entire sector if something went wrong. Captain Morrison stood beside him, his hand never straying far from the emergency lockdown controls. But Elena's attention was focused entirely on her patient. Over the hours of treatment, she had developed an increasingly strong telepathic connection with the infant. Not the overwhelming flood of memories from before, but a gentle, constant awareness of its thoughts and feelings. She could sense its pain, its fear, and most remarkably, its growing trust in her abilities. "I need to access the primary neural cluster," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. "That's where the deepest modifications are embedded." The infant's eyes fluttered open at her words, and Elena felt a pulse of concern flow through their connection. It was afraid not of her, but for her. Somehow it understood that what she was attempting was dangerous, and it didn't want her to be hurt while trying to save it. "Hey there, brave one," Elena whispered, gently stroking the creature's snout with one finger. "Don't you worry about me? I've gotten this far by being too stubborn to quit, and I'm not about to start now." She activated the neural interface probe, a delicate instrument designed to work with alien nervous systems. As the probe made contact with the infant's skull, Elena felt a sudden rush of sensation unlike anything she had ever experienced. The infant's consciousness opened to her completely, sharing not just memories but the fundamental essence of what it meant to be draconic. Elena found herself experiencing the world through senses she didn't possess, feeling electromagnetic fields as colors, hearing the harmonics of distant stars, sensing the quantum fluctuations that bound all matter together. For a terrifying moment, she thought she might lose herself in the alien perspective. But then she felt the infant's presence guiding her, helping her navigate its mindscape while maintaining her own identity. Together, they descended into the deepest layers of its genetic programming, seeking the source of the artificial modifications. What they found there made Elena gasped with horror and rage. The modifications weren't just random attempts to suppress the infant's abilities. They were a systematic torture device, designed to cause maximum psychological trauma while slowly destroying its natural development. The criminals who had stolen this creature hadn't just been trying to create a slave, they had been trying to break its spirit entirely. "Monsters," Elena breathed, her anger burning so hot that she felt the infant's consciousness recoil from the intensity of it. But beneath her rage was a deeper emotion, a fierce, protective love for the small being that had trusted her with its most intimate thoughts. The infant had shown her everything, holding back nothing, and what she saw was a soul of remarkable beauty and strength that had somehow survived unimaginable cruelty. "Never again," she promised, both aloud and through their telepathic connection. "No one will ever hurt you like this again." Working with surgical precision, Elena began dismantling the artificial neural pathways that were causing the infant's system to reject its own biology. It was like performing surgery on a live bomb. One wrong move could trigger a cascade failure that would kill them both. But the infant guided her with its own instinctive understanding of how its mind should work. and together they slowly undid months of systematic damage. As each modification was removed, Elena could feel the infant's natural abilities beginning to reassert themselves. Its telepathic range expanded, its ability to sense energy patterns sharpened, and most remarkably, its capacity for joy began to emerge from beneath layers of imposed trauma. "Elena," Commander Thrix's voice cut through her concentration, "we're detecting massive energy fluctuations from the quarantine chamber. Whatever you're doing, it's affecting the entire station." Elena looked up from her work and noticed that the lights in the chamber had begun to pulse in rhythm with the infant's heartbeat. The air itself seemed to shimmer with barely visible energy patterns, and she could hear a low harmonic that seemed to come from the very walls around her. "It's okay," she called back. "The infant's natural abilities are coming back online. The energy discharge should stabilize in a few minutes." But even as she said it, Elena could feel something else happening. The infant's consciousness was no longer just sharing its experiences with her, it was actively healing her. She felt years of accumulated stress and fatigue melting away as the creature's psychic abilities washed through her system, repairing damage she hadn't even known existed. "What are you doing?" she asked in wonder, feeling stronger and more alert than she had in years. The infant's response came not in words but in pure emotion, gratitude so profound it brought tears to Elena's eyes. It was trying to repay her for saving its life. Using its newly restored abilities to heal the healer, the final modification dissolved under Elena's careful work, and suddenly the infant's vital signs surged toward normal ranges. Its scales brightened, shifting from dull gray back to their original purple-black brilliance. Its breathing deepened and strengthened, and when it opened its eyes, they blazed with the full intelligence and power of its species. "Hello," it said, the word forming clearly in Elena's mind, though its mouth never moved. "Thank you for giving me back myself." Elena laughed with joy and exhaustion, tears streaming down her face as she realized they had succeeded. "Hello yourself, little dragon. What's your name?" "I am Zephyrith," the infant replied, slowly sitting up on the medical table with movements that were now graceful and controlled. "My family calls me Zeph." "Zeph," Elena repeated, loving the way the name felt in her mind. "That's a beautiful name for a beautiful young dragon." The chamber door suddenly hissed open, making Elena spin around in alarm. Commander Thrix stood in the doorway, his scales pale with terror. But he wasn't looking at her, he was staring over her shoulder at something behind her. Elena turned back to see that Zeph was no longer on the table. The infant was floating in midair, surrounded by a halo of energy that made the air sing with power. But instead of the chaotic, dangerous energies from before, this was controlled, purposeful, magnificent. "Do not fear," Zeph said, his telepathic voice now reaching everyone in the chamber and beyond. "I mean no harm to any who dwell in this place. You have sheltered me and healed me, and I will remember this kindness always." Through the observation windows, Elena could see that half the station's population had gathered to witness this moment. Beings from dozens of species stood in awed silence as they experienced their first telepathic contact with a draconic, feeling the vast intelligence and surprising gentleness behind that alien consciousness. "My family approaches," Zeph continued, his mental voice carrying newfound confidence. "They have been searching for me since I was taken. They will arrive within the hour." Commander Thrix found his voice at last. "The Draconic Empire? They're coming here?" "Not the Empire," Zeph corrected gently. "My parents. They care nothing for politics or territory. They only want their child returned safely." Elena felt a flutter of anxiety. "Zeph, what will they think about humans now? I mean, your own people told us you were defective and should be destroyed." The young draconic's mental voice carried a note of amused disdain. "Those were not my people. The Empire's bureaucrats know nothing of our true nature. They fear what they cannot control, so they label anything unexpected as defective." His attention turned to Elena with warm affection. "But my parents will understand what you have done. You have not just saved my life, you have shown them that there are other species capable of the same compassion that we prize above all other virtues." As if summoned by his words, The station's long-range sensors began detecting incoming ships. 3 massive vessels of unknown design were approaching at impossible speeds, moving through space in ways that defied conventional physics. "They're here," Zeph said simply, floating down to land gently on the floor beside Elena, despite his small size. His presence now radiated the same kind of controlled power that Elena had read about in descriptions of adult draconics. "Are you ready to go home?" The quarantine chamber felt like stepping into the heart of a thunderstorm. The air crackled with invisible energy that made Elena's teeth ache and set every nerve ending on fire. Each step toward the medical table sent waves of psionic pressure washing over her, as if the dying infant was unconsciously testing every person who entered its space. Elena forced herself to move slowly, keeping her breathing steady despite the way the alien energy made her lungs feel tight. She dealt with dangerous patients before: venomous reptiloids, plague carriers, even a few psychotic telepaths, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer intensity of presence this tiny creature projected. The infant draconic was even more magnificent up close. Its scales weren't just purple and black. They contained swirling patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight. Each individual scale was perfectly formed, catching and reflecting the chamber's lights in ways that suggested they were made of something far more complex than simple keratin. Its claws, though small, were crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around their edges. "Hello, little one," Elena whispered, stopping about 3 feet from the table. She could see the creature's vital signs on the monitors around her, and they were worse than she'd feared. Its heart was beating irregularly, its brain activity was fluctuating wildly, and its internal temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. As she spoke, the infant's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. They were unlike anything Elena had ever seen, not just the color, which was like looking into deep space scattered with stars, but the intelligence behind them. Even dying, even barely conscious, those eyes held an awareness that was both ancient and heartbreakingly young. The moment of eye contact sent a pulse of emotion through Elena's mind that nearly drove her to her knees. Terror, confusion, pain, and underneath it all, a desperate longing for comfort that transcended species. The infant was afraid, but not of her. It was afraid of being alone, of dying without anyone to care about its passing. "Oh, sweetheart," Elena breathed, taking another step closer. "You're not alone anymore." The psionic pressure in the room shifted, becoming less chaotic and more focused. Elena realized the infant was trying to understand her intentions, scanning her surface thoughts in the same way she might check a patient's reflexes. She made a conscious effort to project calm, peaceful emotions while keeping her thoughts simple and clear. She pulled out her medical scanner and began taking readings, speaking in a soft, continuous voice as she worked. "I know you're scared, but I'm here to help. My name is Elena, and I'm a doctor. That means I fix hurt things and make them feel better." The scanner revealed the extent of the infant's condition, and Elena had to suppress a gasp. It wasn't just malnourished and dehydrated, its entire biological system was shutting down from some kind of genetic incompatibility. Its cellular structure was rejecting something, fighting against its own nature in a way that was slowly killing it. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, running deeper scans. "Your basic physiology is stable, but something is causing a cascade failure in your immune system." As she worked, Elena became aware that the infant was watching her with increasing intensity. Its breathing was still labored, but its eyes were now staying open for longer periods, tracking her movements with obvious intelligence. When she leaned closer to check its temperature, it made a soft sound, not quite a purr, not quite a whimper, but something uniquely draconic that spoke of desperate hope. "I know, baby. I know it hurts." Elena began preparing in 4-line, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the alien anatomy she was working with. "The good news is, I think I know what's wrong with you. The bad news is, it's going to take some creativity to fix it." The scans had revealed something unexpected. The infant's cellular structure contained traces of artificial genetic modification, not natural evolution, but deliberate engineering. Someone had altered this creature's fundamental biology, and now its body was rejecting those modifications like a failed organ transplant. Who did this to you? Elena asked softly, gently inserting the forecatheter into what she hoped was the equivalent of a vein. The infant flinched but didn't pull away, seemingly understanding that she was trying to help Dot as the four fluids began flowing into its system. The infant's condition stabilized slightly. Its heart rate became more regular, and some of the gray pallor left its scales. But Elena knew this was just buying time. Without addressing the underlying genetic conflict, the creature would still die within hours. She activated her communicator, knowing that Thrix and Morrison would be monitoring everything from the observation deck. Commander, I need you to contact the Draconic Empire again. Ask them specifically about genetic modifications to their young. This infant has been artificially altered, and that's what's killing it. Thrix's voice crackled through the speaker, tight with stress. Dr. Vasquez, the Draconic representative was very clear that all communication regarding the infant should cease immediately. Then don't tell them it's about the infant, Elena replied, adjusting the foreflow rate as she monitored the creature's response. Frame it as a general medical inquiry about draconic biology. Tell them a human doctor is writing a research paper on genetic adaptation in space-dwelling species. While she waited for a response, Elena continued her examination. The infant was becoming more alert, its eyes following her movements with obvious curiosity. When she accidentally brushed against its wing, it made that soft sound again, and she felt a gentle pulse of what could only be described as gratitude flow through her mind. "You're welcome, sweetheart," she said, surprising herself by how naturally she responded to the telepathic contact. "We're going to figure this out together." The infant's response was immediate and overwhelming. A flood of images and emotions poured into Elena's consciousness, memories of floating alone in the cold darkness of space, of pain and confusion and desperate hunger. But underneath the traumatic recent memories were older ones, warm and golden, being held by massive, clawed hands, feeling safe and protected, hearing a voice that resonated through both sound and thought, singing gentle lullabies. Elena gasped and stumbled backward as the connection broke, her eyes wide with shock. The infant had just shared its memories with her, something the intelligence reports had said adult draconics only did with their most trusted allies. "Elena," Morrison's voice cut through her stunned silence. "Are you all right? Your vital signs just spiked off the charts." "I'm fine," she managed, though her hands were shaking. It showed me what happened to it." The memories were still vivid in her mind. The infant hadn't been abandoned, it had been stolen. Taken from its family by someone who had tried to modify its genetics for unknown purposes. When the modifications began killing it, its captors had simply jettisoned it into space rather than face the wrath of the Draconic Empire. Elena looked at the infant with new understanding. "You're not defective, are you? Someone tried to change you, and now your body is fighting to get back to what you're supposed to be." The creature's response was a weak but unmistakable nod. Its intelligence clearly far beyond what anyone had expected from such a young being. Elena's communicator chirped, and Thrix's voice filled the chamber. "Dr. Vasquez, I have a response from the Draconic Medical Division. They're curious about your research. They want to know why a human would be interested in draconic genetic adaptation." "Tell them the truth," Elena said, her mind racing as she began formulating a treatment plan. "Tell them I believe I've encountered a case of forced genetic modification that's causing cellular rejection syndrome. Ask them about reversal protocols." There was a long pause before Thrix responded. "They want to speak with you directly. They're opening a communication channel now." Elena felt her heart rate spike, but she accepted the connection. A holographic display materialized in front of her, showing the image of an adult draconic in what appeared to be a medical facility. The being was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with scales that shimmered like oil on water and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of eons. "Human doctor," the draconic said, its voice carrying harmonics that made Elena's bones vibrate. "I am Healer Sifkar of the Draconic Medical Collective. You claim to have encountered illegal genetic modification. Describe the symptoms." Elena quickly outlined the infant's condition, careful to stick to medical terminology and avoid revealing that she was treating an actual draconic patient. Sithkar listened with growing intensity, its massive head tilting slightly as she described the cellular rejection patterns. "This matches a known syndrome," the healer said finally. "There are criminals who steal our young and attempt to modify them for the slave markets. They try to suppress our natural psionic abilities to make us more manageable. The process is always fatal, which is why any infant found with these modifications is considered lost." "But there has to be a treatment," Elena pressed. "Some way to reverse the modifications and restore the natural genetic pattern." Sithkar's expression became unreadable. "There is a theoretical treatment, but it requires precise application of psionic energy to guide the cells back to their original configuration. Only an adult draconic can provide the necessary mental framework." Elena's heart sank. What if The emergency klaxons echoed through the corridors of Nexus Station as Dr. Elena Vasquez hurried toward the quarantine bay. Her medical bag bounced against her hip with each rushed step. The familiar weight, a small comfort in the chaos that had erupted 3 hours ago. The station's artificial gravity hummed beneath her feet, a steady reminder that she was floating in the void between stars, dealing with something no human had ever encountered before. "Dr. Vasquez." "Thank the void you're here," gasped Commander Thrix, the Zalarian station chief. His usually pristine blue scales were dulled with stress, and his 4 eyes darted nervously between Elena and the sealed blast doors behind him. "The situation has become complicated." Elena adjusted her ponytail and checked her scanner readings. "Define complicated, Commander." "Your message said we had an injured alien infant, species unknown." "That's what I prepared for." Thrix's mandibles clicked anxiously, a sound that never failed to set Elena's teeth on edge. "Yes, but we didn't know what species when we sent that message." "We know now." He gestured toward the observation deck with one of his 4 arms. "It's a draconic." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She stopped walking and turned to face the commander fully. "A draconic? As in the apex predator species that conquered half the known galaxy? The ones whose adults can melt through starship hulls with their breath? Those draconics?" "The very same." Thrix's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The infant was found drifting in an escape pod near the Kepler Nebula. No adult supervision, no guardians. Just alone. Our rescue teams thought it was already dead when they brought it aboard." Elena resumed walking, her mind racing through everything she knew about draconic physiology. It wasn't much. The species was so feared and so powerful that most other races avoided them entirely. Medical texts had maybe 3 paragraphs about their basic biology, and most of that was speculation. Why haven't you contacted the Draconic Empire? Surely they'd want their young back. We tried. Thrix's scales rippled with anxiety patterns Elena had learned to recognize during her 2 years on the station. The response was unexpected. They told us to dispose of it immediately. Said any draconic found without its family unit was defective and should be eliminated for the good of the species. They reached the observation deck, and Elena pressed her face to the reinforced glass. The quarantine bay below was a sterile white chamber designed to hold the most dangerous biological specimens in known space. In the center, on what looked like an oversized medical table, lay something that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. The infant draconic was perhaps 3 feet long from nose to tail tip, with scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight black in the artificial lighting. Its wings were folded against its sides, translucent membranes showing the delicate bone structure underneath. Even unconscious, it radiated an aura of barely contained power that made the air in the observation deck feel heavy and charged. "Beautiful," Elena whispered before she could stop herself. "Beautiful?" Thrix's voice cracked with disbelief. "Dr. Vasquez, that creature will grow up to be able to level cities with its mind alone. Adult draconics can manipulate matter at the molecular level. They communicate through telepathy so advanced it can drive other species insane." "And you call it beautiful?" Elena was already studying the readouts from the various scanners pointed at the infant. Its heart rate is erratic. Temperature is dropping. These readings suggest severe malnutrition and dehydration. She turned to face Thrix. How long has it been unconscious? Since we brought it aboard, Dr. Kent examined it remotely and declared it was dying. He estimated maybe 6 hours before complete system failure. 6 hours? Elena checked her chronometer. Commander, that was 5 hours ago. Why wasn't I called immediately? Thrix's scales flushed darker blue with embarrassment. The medical staff. They refused to enter the chamber. Even Dr. Kent, with all his experience with dangerous species, said the risk was too great. Draconic infants are born with active psionic abilities. One wrong move, one frightened reaction, and it could kill everyone on this level of the station. Elena stared down at the dying creature below. Its breathing was so shallow she could barely see its chest rising and falling. So you're all just going to let it die? It's not that simple, Doctor. The new voice belonged to Captain Morrison, the human security chief for this sector of the station. Elena had worked with him before and respected his judgment, which made his next words all the more troubling. I've been in contact with Draconic Military Command. They're sending a ship to collect the body for ... Proper disposal? But they made it very clear that anyone who has had direct contact with the infant needs to be quarantined and examined. Examined for what? Morrison's face was grim. Psionic contamination. Apparently, dying draconics can transfer memories, emotions, even fragments of consciousness to nearby beings. The Draconic Empire considers this a form of biological weapon. Anyone affected becomes a security risk and must be neutralized. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, but she couldn't take her eyes off the infant below. As she watched, one of its tiny claws twitched, and she could swear she saw its eyes flutter beneath closed lids. So our choices are let it die and hope the Empire doesn't decide we're all contaminated anyway, or try to save it and definitely get ourselves killed. That's about the size of it, Morrison confirmed. The medical staff wants to increase the sedatives to make its passing more comfortable, but they won't go in to administer them. Cowards, Elena muttered, then caught herself. No, that's not fair. They're being logical. The risk really is enormous. She pressed her hands against the glass, studying every detail of the creature below. Its scales seemed to pulse faintly with their own light, and she noticed that the monitoring equipment was picking up energy readings unlike anything she'd seen before. The infant was more than just a biological entity. It was like a living battery of cosmic force barely contained in physical form. There has to be a way, she said, more to herself than to the others. Some method of providing medical care without triggering its defensive systems. Dr. Vasquez, Thrix said carefully, I must remind you that this creature's parents essentially abandoned it to die. Even its own species considers it worthless. Perhaps we should respect that judgment. Elena spun around to face him, anger flashing in her dark eyes. Since when do we let parents determine the medical fate of their children? That thing down there is a baby, Commander? A scared, dying baby. I don't care if it grows up to be able to destroy planets. Right now it needs help, but the risk, there's always risk. Elena was already moving toward the airlock controls. When I became a doctor, I swore an oath to do no harm and to preserve life. I didn't see any footnotes about excluding certain species. Morrison stepped in front of her, blocking her path to the airlock. Elena, think about this. I've seen the classified reports on adult draconics. During the border wars, one of them killed an entire battalion of soldiers just by looking at them. Their psionic abilities aren't magic, they're weaponized evolution. That infant might look harmless now, but if you startle it awake, ... Elena met his gaze steadily. Then I won't startle it. You can't guarantee that. No, I can't. She stepped around him and placed her hand on the airlock controls. But I can guarantee that if I don't try, it will die. And I've spent my entire career fighting death. I'm not about to stop now. Thrix's mandibles clicked rapidly in extreme agitation. Dr. Vasquez, I am ordering you to step away from that airlock. As station commander, I cannot allow you to risk not just your life, but the lives of everyone aboard this facility. Elena paused with her hand hovering over the control panel. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders like lead. 3,000 beings lived and worked on Nexus Station. Scientists, traders, diplomats, families with children. If she was wrong about her ability to help the infant safely, she could doom them all. But below in the quarantine bay, the tiny Draconic's breathing was growing even more labored. Its scales were losing their inner light, fading to dull gray. Even the energy readings were dropping towards zero. "Commander," she said quietly, "what if this infant isn't defective? What if it was separated from its family by accident, by some disaster we don't know about? What if somewhere out there, Draconic parents are searching desperately for their lost child?" "That's a very human way of thinking," Thrix replied. "The Draconics don't form emotional attachments the way other species do." "Says who? The same intelligence reports that told us they were emotionless monsters before we learned they create the most beautiful art in the galaxy?" Elena shook her head. "We know almost nothing about their family structures, their child-rearing practices, their emotional lives. We've been too afraid of them to learn." She entered her medical override code into the airlock controls. Red lights began flashing, and a computer voice announced that quarantine protocols were being violated. But the inner door remained sealed, waiting for her final command. "There's something else," she said, her voice barely audible over the alarm klaxons. "I've been studying the energy readings from the infant. They're not random. There's a pattern, a rhythm that matches typical distress calls across multiple species." Morrison moved to the scanner displays, his security,